When I was 25, I was broke. Not just financially, but mentally. I had debts piling up, no plan, and no direction. It wasn't the lack of money that kept me poor. It was the way I thought about money, the way I thought about work, and even the way I thought about myself. That's when I learned a lesson that stayed with me for the rest of my life. Wealth doesn't begin with a paycheck. It begins with philosophy. If you have the wrong philosophy, no amount of income will ever be enough, because you'll always find a way to spend it faster than you earn it. But if you develop the right philosophy, even a modest income can become the seed of a fortune. I remember sitting with my mentor, who asked me a simple question: do you have 10 cents saved from every dollar you've earned? I had to admit, embarrassed, that I didn't. He smiled and said, then we'll start there. That was philosophy in action. It wasn't about how much I was making. It was about what I was doing with what I had. Too many people wait for more income to fix their problems, but more income without discipline only magnifies the problem. I've seen people earn millions and lose it all because their philosophy was rooted in spending, in showing off, in chasing pleasures instead of building assets. And I've seen others with modest wages build freedom because they valued saving, investing, and learning. Philosophy is simply the set of principles you live by. If your philosophy is neglect, neglecting to plan, neglecting to learn, neglecting to discipline yourself, then poverty is the natural result. But if your philosophy is discipline, then wealth is just as natural. Discipline is deciding to live on less than you earn. Discipline is choosing to learn something about money instead of wasting an evening on trivial entertainment. Discipline is saying no to impulse so you can say yes to opportunity. The truth is, wealth is never an accident. It's a consequence. It's the harvest of seeds planted long before the first big paycheck arrives. So before you think about earning more, ask yourself, what philosophy am I building my life on? Because a paycheck without philosophy is like water poured into a bucket full of holes. It all leaks out. But with the right philosophy, even a trickle can fill the bucket, and over time, it can overflow into abundance. When I was a young man, my thoughts were small. I thought only of the rent that was due, the bills I had to cover, and how I could make it through the week without sinking further into debt. That kind of thinking kept me trapped, because survival thinking never creates expansion. It only maintains struggle. The turning point came when I realized that the wealthy didn't ask, how do I get through this week? They asked a different question. Who can I become in 10 years? That single shift in perspective opened a whole new world for me. Because when you stretch your vision beyond the immediate, you create room for growth that simply doesn't exist when you're only thinking about today. I'll never forget when my mentor told me, set a goal that is so big it will require you to grow into the kind of person who can achieve it. At first, I didn't believe him. I thought, how could a farm boy from Idaho with no college education dream of wealth and freedom? But then I began to understand that thinking big isn't about arrogance. It's about capacity. If your vision is small, your life stays small. If your goals are only about paying bills, then once the bills are paid, you lose your drive. But when your goals are about abundance, building a life of freedom, creating value for others, becoming a person of wisdom and influence, then every day has purpose, even the hard ones. When I began thinking 10 years ahead, I stopped making decisions based on impulse and started making them based on destiny. Suddenly, reading a book tonight mattered, because in 10 years, that knowledge could make me a better leader, a better entrepreneur, a better man. Saving $1 mattered, because in 10 years, that discipline could multiply into capital, and capital into freedom. Small choices today become enormous results tomorrow when you're guided by a long-term vision. Most people never discover their potential because they're trapped in the cycle of immediate needs. But when you start asking bigger questions, what kind of person am I becoming? What legacy am I building? How far can I go if I give myself 10 years? Then you step into a larger arena of life. Big thinking stretches you, and stretched capacity makes room for growth. If you want abundance instead of survival, don't just think about today's problem. Think about the person you can become a decade from now, and let that vision pull you forward every single day. I once believed that money was connected to need. I thought if I worked hard enough, showed up every day, and hoped long enough, the world would somehow notice my struggles and reward me. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does the marketplace. The marketplace doesn't respond to your needs, it responds to your value. You can plead, complain, or even pray for higher wages, but unless you become more valuable, nothing changes. That was a sobering lesson I had to learn as a young man. I remember working hard, sweating through long hours, and still going home broke. My needs were great, but my value was small. And until I changed that equation, nothing about my financial situation was going to change. My mentor once looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better." That struck me like lightning. It shifted my entire way of thinking because it meant I wasn't a victim of circumstances. I was the architect of my own value. If I wanted the marketplace to reward me more, I had to bring more. I had to grow skills, expand knowledge, and cultivate character. From that moment on, I treated personal development as the key to wealth. Every book I read, every skill I practiced, every habit of discipline I built, it was all increasing my value, and over time, the marketplace paid me accordingly. Think about it this way. Two people can work the same number of hours, but one earns 10 times more. Why? Not because of need. They both have bills to pay. It's because one has become more valuable. Maybe they've mastered communication, leadership, or problem solving. Maybe they've learned to see opportunities others overlook. Whatever it is, the principle remains the same. Money flows to value. And the beautiful part is that value isn't fixed. It can be increased daily through deliberate effort. So if you're tired of struggling, don't focus on convincing the world of your needs. Focus on convincing yourself to grow. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Learn skills that make you indispensable. Develop wisdom that others can lean on. Become the person the marketplace can't afford to ignore. Because once you understand that money is a reflection of value, not need, you stop waiting for a raise and start raising yourself. And when you raise yourself, the income follows naturally as a consequence of who you've become. When I was young, I thought freedom meant doing whatever I pleased, spending when I felt like it, skipping the hard tasks, indulging every impulse. But over time, I discovered the opposite was true. That kind of living only chained me deeper into debt, frustration, and regret. Real freedom doesn't come from doing as you please. It comes from discipline. Discipline is the price you pay to buy freedom. Without it, you're at the mercy of circumstances, but with it, you gradually build a life of choice and independence. I remember when I was broke, avoiding calls from creditors, barely able to cover rent. I thought I just needed more money, but I was wrong. What I needed was discipline. I had to learn how to say no to immediate pleasure in order to say yes to a better future. I had to save a little even when it seemed impossible. I had to set aside time every day for study, even when no one was watching. I had to practice the restraint of living below my means so that someday I could live beyond limitations. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't instant. But every small daily habit was a brick in the foundation of freedom. Think of it like planting seeds. You don't see the harvest right away, But each day of watering, each day of tending, compounds into a field of abundance. Saving a little every week doesn't look like much, but after years it grows into wealth. Reading a few pages a day seems trivial, but over decades, it makes you wise. Practicing restraint may feel uncomfortable at first, but it builds strength that sets you apart. Discipline is not punishment, it's preparation. It's the quiet investment in your future self. I often say, discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. The effort of waking early, putting away a portion of your earnings, practicing focus instead of distraction. It may feel like ounces on your shoulders today, but the regret of neglect, of waking up years later broke, unskilled, and unprepared, that burden is crushing. Discipline lifts you, neglect buries you. The good news is, discipline isn't reserved for a select few. Anyone can practice it, starting now in small ways. And once you build consistency, life opens doors. Wealth becomes a natural byproduct. Freedom stops being a wish and becomes a reality. Because freedom isn't found in impulse, it's earned, one disciplined day at a time. I learned early that one of the greatest traps people fall into is spending money to look rich instead of using money to become rich. It's tempting, I know. When the first few dollars come in, the urge is to buy the car that turns heads, the clothes that impress, the gadgets that make you feel important. But appearances don't pay the bills, and they certainly don't build wealth. Assets do. The poor often buy luxuries first. The wealthy buy income-producing assets first. It's not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing wisely what comes first. When I was young and broke, I had friends who made just as little as I did, but they always seemed to be flashing something new. A watch, a stereo, a shiny car bought on credit. For a while, I envied them. But then I realized something. At the end of the month, they were as broke as ever, sometimes worse. Meanwhile, I began practicing restraint. Instead of buying luxuries, I bought books. Instead of financing an image, I invested in ideas, skills, and later, real assets that produced income. And over time, the results were undeniable. They had appearances that faded. I had wealth that compounded. Think about the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset works for you. A liability makes you work harder. That new car, the moment you drive it off the lot, it starts losing value. But buy a rental property, and it pays you month after month. That fancy suit might look sharp, but it won't generate income. Invest in your own business or in shares of a company, and it will. The wealthy understand this simple equation. Use assets to buy luxuries, not the other way around. Now, this doesn't mean you can't enjoy life. Of course you can, but timing matters. First build the foundation, then decorate the house. If you put appearance before substance, you'll always be chasing, always under pressure. But if you let assets lead the way, one day your assets will buy your luxuries, and you won't have to worry about the cost. So ask yourself, every time money comes into your hands, is this going to work for me or against me? Will it grow or will it fade? That one simple shift from chasing appearances to acquiring assets can change your entire financial destiny. Because in the end, wealth isn't about looking rich. It's about being rich enough to let money serve you instead of you serving it. When I was 25, I thought the solution to all my problems was simply to earn more money. I told myself, if I could just double my income, everything would be better. But soon I learned a powerful truth. Money doesn't grow until you do. You don't attract more wealth by chance. You attract it by becoming more valuable. And the fastest way to increase your value is through learning. Skills compound faster than money. A new skill today becomes a new opportunity tomorrow. A new idea today becomes a new stream of income later. The wealthiest people I've met, without exception, were all relentless students. I was a farm boy with no college education, no impressive background, and no special advantages. What turned my life around wasn't luck, it was education. The kind you pursue for yourself. I devoured books on business, psychology, finance, philosophy. I attended every seminar I could afford, often sitting in the back with a borrowed suit, taking notes furiously. At first it seemed like a slow climb, but after a few years I noticed something. I was thinking differently. I was speaking differently. I was making decisions with more clarity. People began to trust me, to pay me, to seek my advice. That didn't happen because money showed up. It happened because learning transformed me into someone who could handle money. Skills are the great equalizer. You can lose every dollar you've saved, but if you've built skills, you can rebuild. That's why wealthy people protect their learning habits with the same seriousness others reserve for their bank accounts. They know that while money can be spent or stolen, knowledge multiplies and stays with you forever. Learn how to communicate, and doors open. Learn how to lead, and opportunities expand. Learn the language of money, and suddenly, investments begin to make sense. Every skill stacks on the last, compounding like interest, except faster. The tragedy is that most people stop learning after school. They think education ends with a diploma, but real education begins when you choose it yourself. I was once broke and embarrassed, but the moment I picked up the habit of reading, listening, and studying, my life started compounding in ways no paycheck ever could. So let me tell you this, don't chase money, chase growth. Read the book. Take the course, ask the questions, observe the masters, invest in your mind every single day, because if you keep growing, wealth cannot help but follow. Skills compound faster than money, and once you understand that, you'll never see learning as a chore again. You'll see it as your greatest investment. When I was young and struggling, I thought money problems were purely about numbers, how much came in, how much went out. But as the years passed, I discovered something deeper. Most financial ruin isn't caused by lack of money. It's caused by lack of control. Wealth escapes those who are ruled by impulses. A man who cannot master his emotions will never master his money. The impulse to spend, to quit too soon, to lash out in anger, to chase the quick win, those are the thieves of fortune. I remember times when opportunity slipped through my hands, not because I didn't have the talent, but because I didn't have the patience. I reacted too quickly, let frustration dictate my choices, or fear talked me out of risk, and every time I let emotions take the wheel, regret soon followed. My mentor told me something that stayed with me forever. Don't be a creature of reaction, be a master of response. The difference between those two words, reaction and response, can determine the size of your wealth and even the quality of your life. So how do you train yourself to respond rather than react? You build a gap between stimulus and decision. I taught myself a simple rule. Pause for 10 seconds before making any major choice. 10 seconds doesn't sound like much, but it's long enough to calm the initial surge of anger, greed, or fear. It's long enough to ask, what outcome do I really want here? Will this action move me closer to freedom or further away? That pause has saved me from foolish purchases, hasty investments, and words I could never take back. Wealthy people aren't without emotions. They feel the same excitement, fear, and doubt as everyone else. The difference is they've learned not to let those emotions drive their decisions. They've cultivated patience in negotiations, discipline in investments, and composure in setbacks. That calm steadiness becomes a magnet for opportunity because people trust those who remain grounded when others panic. So if you want to build wealth, don't just train your mind, train your heart. Learn to pause, breathe, and choose wisely. The fortune you desire won't come from luck or raw emotion. It will come from disciplined response. And the day you master your emotions is the day you stop being a prisoner of impulses and start becoming the architect of your own destiny. When I look back on my early years, one of the greatest shifts in my life didn't come from earning more or meeting someone influential. It came from picking up a pen. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. You see, life gives us both wins and mistakes. But unless you pause to capture them, the lessons slip away. That's why I began the habit of journaling, both financial and personal. A journal is more than paper. It's a mirror of your growth, a record of your battles, a map that shows you how far you've come and where you still need to go. I still remember when I first started. I was drowning in debt, feeling lost, and my mentor asked me, "Do you write down what happens to you?" I said, "No, I just live it." He shook his head and replied, "Then you're wasting some of the best tuition life offers." That day, I bought a notebook and began recording. I wrote about my tiny victories, like saving $5 when I wanted to spend 10. I wrote about mistakes, like chasing a business idea without research. And most importantly, I wrote the lessons. Slowly, patterns emerged. I could see where my impulses cost me, where my discipline paid off, and where my mindset needed work. Over the years, those journals became my most valuable assets. They didn't just hold my past, they shaped my future. Every time I flipped back through the pages, I could see the evidence of growth. I could see myself becoming more disciplined, more skilled, more aware. Reflection gave me clarity that memory alone could never provide. Here's the strategy. Keep 2 journals. One for finances, track your spending, savings, investments, and the emotions that came with them. Numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Write what you felt, what tempted you, what excited you. And another journal for personal growth. Your habits, your decisions, your daily reflections. At the end of each week, write about your wins, your mistakes, and the lessons you've learned. That practice turns ordinary days into extraordinary preparation. The marketplace rewards wisdom, not just effort. And wisdom is simply experience that's been reflected upon. By documenting your journey, you transform failure into feedback and success into a repeatable formula. The journal becomes your private mentor, reminding you of truths you might otherwise forget. So pick up the pen. Don't let your life pass by undocumented. Because one day, when you're living the results of discipline and wealth, you'll look back through those pages and realize you didn't just create money, you created wisdom. And wisdom, unlike money, will serve you for a lifetime. When I first began working, I traded hours for dollars, just like most people. It felt secure at the time. Do the work, get the pay. But very quickly I realized that if I wanted freedom, if I wanted wealth, I couldn't spend my entire life working harder and longer. There's a limit to how many hours you can give, but there is no limit to how many times your effort can be multiplied if you build it the right way. Wealth is built on the principle of leverage. Work once, earn many times. That's how you create a life where your time is no longer your ceiling. I remember when I planted my first orchard. The first year was labor, digging, watering, protecting those fragile trees. No fruit, just work. But I stayed consistent. And eventually those trees bore fruit. And here's the beautiful part. They bore fruit not once, But season after season, that orchard became a system. My one-time effort kept paying dividends long after the initial sweat had dried. That's the model you want in your financial life. Assets, businesses, or tools that keep producing without demanding your constant presence. This is why the wealthy build systems instead of just relying on effort. A book written once can earn royalties for decades. A smart investment in real estate can produce rent month after month. A well-structured business can keep generating profits even while you're asleep. The secret is to take what you know, what you can build, and create a structure around it so that it works without you pushing it every moment. But leverage doesn't just appear, it has to be designed. Here's the practical step. Start by identifying one process in your work or business you can automate or delegate this month. Maybe it's automating your savings so money flows into investments before you can spend it. Maybe it's creating a repeatable system in your business for onboarding clients. Maybe it's documenting a process so someone else can handle it instead of you. Small systems stack into big freedoms. The key is to stop thinking in terms of effort and start thinking in terms of multiplication. If you keep trading time for money, you'll always be capped. But if you build systems, those systems set you free. The day you realize you've built something that pays you while you sleep is the day you've crossed the line from laborer to architect of wealth. And that's when real freedom begins. When I first began earning more than just a modest paycheck, I thought the natural thing to do was to upgrade my life immediately. A bigger house, a nicer car, fancier clothes. After all, hadn't I earned it? But then I looked around at people making twice what I was making, and many of them were still broke, stressed, and living on the edge of collapse. That's when it hit me. It isn't how much you make that determines your freedom. It's how much you keep. Modesty funds freedom. If you spend everything you earn, even a fortune, you've simply built a larger cage. But if you learn to live below your means, you've built the foundation for wealth that lasts. Too many people expand their lifestyle faster than their income. They get a raise and immediately increase their expenses. The result? They're running on the same treadmill, just with shinier shoes. Wealthy people think differently. They allow their income to rise, but they let their lifestyle grow slowly, deliberately. They know the gap between what you earn and what you spend. That margin is what funds investments, what buys freedom, what gives you choices. Without that margin, you are chained to your next paycheck, no matter how impressive it looks. Here's a strategy that's worked for me and countless others. Cap your lifestyle expenses at 70% of your income and invest the rest. If you're disciplined enough to keep your wants in check, that 30% becomes the seed of your financial orchard. Over time, those investments begin to produce income of their own, and eventually, it's that income, not your labor, that supports your life. That's the day you step into real wealth, where money works harder than you do. I'll tell you a simple story. Early in my career, when I finally started seeing success, I had the urge to buy a luxury car. My mentor pulled me aside and said, "If you buy that car now, it will look good in the driveway, but it won't produce anything for you. If you take that same money and invest it, in a few years, it'll buy you 10 cars, and you'll still have your capital intact." That lesson never left me. Appearances fade, but assets compound. Living below your means is not deprivation, it's wisdom. It's trading temporary indulgence for permanent freedom. It's ensuring that when opportunity knocks, you have the resources to answer. And in the long run, that modesty will buy you something far greater than luxury. It will buy you peace, independence, and the ability to live life on your own terms. In my early years, I often thought only about today, what bills I had to pay, what pleasures I could afford, what problems I could fix in the moment. And that kind of thinking kept me trapped. Poverty is thinking only about today. Wealth, on the other hand, thinks about tomorrow. The moment I began shifting my perspective from survival in the present to preparation for the future, everything in my life started to change. I realized that the future is where I'd spend the rest of my life. So it only made sense to make decisions that served the person I was becoming, not just the person I was in that moment. Think of it like planting a tree. If all you do is enjoy the shade of someone else's tree today, you may feel comfortable now, but years from now you'll be standing in the sun with nothing to show for it. But if you take the time to plant your own, water it, nurture it, and protect it, the future version of you will enjoy shade, fruit, and abundance. Wealthy people think this way every day. They understand that every decision is a seed, and seeds don't grow overnight, but given time, they multiply beyond what you can imagine. Here's a practical step that I've used. Before you spend money, ask yourself, will future me thank me for this? That one question can stop you from trading tomorrow's opportunities for today's impulses. Maybe it's about skipping the unnecessary purchase and investing instead. Maybe it's about learning a skill rather than wasting hours on empty entertainment. Maybe it's about setting aside capital for a business idea rather than spending on temporary pleasures. Every time you choose in favor of your future self, you've put yourself one step closer to freedom. I remember when I was tempted to spend heavily after my first big commission check. My instinct said, celebrate big. But my mentor's words rang in my ears. Don't just celebrate today, prepare for tomorrow. I invested most of it. And years later, that single decision produced opportunities I could never have bought with a night of spending. That's the power of staying future focused. So let me leave you with this. The future will either be your friend or your enemy, and that depends entirely on how you treat it. Today, every choice is a vote for the kind of life you want years down the road. When you choose wisely, future, you will rise up with gratitude, and that gratitude will come in the form of freedom, wealth, and peace of mind. When I first started, my vision was small. So small, in fact, that I only wanted to make enough to pay the bills on time and keep food on the table. And while that was an honest goal, it kept me trapped in the cycle of just enough. Wealth is only as large as the vision behind it. If your vision is survival, you'll survive. If your vision is modest comfort, that's all you'll ever reach. But if your vision stretches beyond your current circumstances, if you imagine creating abundance, contributing to others, leaving a legacy, then your wealth will grow to match that vision. Life has a way of rewarding those who dare to see further than the rest. I remember being told once, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. That phrase struck me because it shifted my vision from hoping for luck to preparing for growth. You don't expand wealth by staying in the same box year after year. You expand by raising your sights as you grow. The ladder of success doesn't end at one rung. It keeps going, and the only question is whether you're climbing or staying put. So here's the strategy I learned. Never let your vision stay the same size for too long. If you've achieved something you once dreamed of, don't stop there. Raise the bar. Maybe it's no longer about paying the bills, it's about buying your freedom. Maybe it's no longer about building wealth just for yourself. It's about creating opportunities for your family, your community, or even people you'll never meet. When your vision grows, your discipline follows, your creativity sharpens, and suddenly new opportunities come into focus that you would have never noticed with a smaller view. Here's a simple but powerful practice. Every year, sit down and rewrite your vision at a higher level of impact. Not just more money, but more contribution. Not just more possessions, but more influence. Ask yourself, What greater version of myself can I become in the next 12 months? This habit keeps you stretching, keeps you alive, and keeps you moving toward a future that excites you rather than one that merely repeats today. In the end, the size of your wealth will rarely exceed the size of your vision. So if you want more, see more. If you want to climb higher, look higher. Life doesn't give us what we need. It gives us what we dream, plan, and work toward with courage and discipline.